Hamza, here we go. All right, Aaron picked up KEF R7 metas for FLFR
Front, left, front,
2600
right.
2600 pair open box and R6 meta for center. How do you think the setup will be strictly for home theater? R3 meta.
That's going to be pretty awesome, man. That R6 meta looks like it'd be a pretty dang good center channel too. And then R3 metas that surrounds. Yeah, dude. I think you made a good choice. I hate that you sent a $5 super chat for me to be like, good job, because I don't have any input. You did good, man.
I think
good speakers.
I think you are going to have a great setup.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me expand on this real quick then. KEF typically has good off-axis directivity, right? So on-axis and off-axis sound good, pretty decent directivity because of the concentric design. How does that compare to, let's say, another speaker that has a pretty good on-axis response, right? But the directivity is not as good as these. Like, what is that in a normal person experience, right? Not technical, like just purely from a standpoint of a normal person.
One thing is just more consistent sound from seat to seat, more ease and equalization, more predictability with, let's say you're using a target curve. The likelihood of you being able to achieve your target curve with a speaker that is more uniform in its radiation is easier than a speaker that is not uniform in its radiation, because reflected sounds matter, right? And the smaller the room is, like a typical room, the more reflected sound you have, and those reflections sounding different than the direct sound is going to confuse your ear, and things just aren't going to sound right as good as they would with a better directivity speaker, or speaker that has both good on and off axis response.
And how does that affect imaging?
In my experience, it makes imaging more sharp, more focused. It also, I think the other thing too for a home theater setup is really just the ability to sit in different seats and have a very similar sound from seat to seat. There's not a lot of variation. And with that R6 meta, because it's a three-way coaxial design, it will behave vertically the same basically as horizontally. So when you go off axis and you're sitting far off to the side, you don't have to worry about being in a null at the crossover point between the tweeter and the mid-range, because they're in the same physical space. And then the mid-woofers are going to be crossed over low enough to where that mid-range is going to cover a lot of the typical areas where you're going to have issues with a standard MTM type design. Well, hold on. Yeah, MTM. So where you have a mid-range mid-woofer, tweeter, mid-range mid-woofer, like stacked on top of each other, then laid down on the side. When you listen to a center channel like that and you move around to the side of it, you'll notice that there is a hole in the response. And it's because at some point the sound waves from the woofers and the tweeters are canceling out. They're not combining to one point source, and you have a hole in the response. I'm done.
That's all. And then also with this concentric, when you get up to get your popcorn, it's going to sound good when you stand up still.
It's going to sound good, man. So that's why
walk out, it's still going to sound good.
That's one reason why it is becoming more, at least maybe I'm seeing it more. I see a lot of people talk about their homes have living room, kitchen combined. And my home has that, right? So when I'm getting up or I'm walking around or I'm maybe doing something in the kitchen, but I'm also watching television or listening to music, the sound doesn't change a lot from when I'm sitting at the prime seated position in that living room to when I'm standing up walking around the room, because the vertical radiation doesn't suffer as much as it normally does with like a typical two-way design where you have a tweeter and a mid-woofer, and you stand up or you sit below that design axis like the tweeter usually, and you hear a null. You're like, where'd the sound go? Right? Like where'd the intensity or the attack, where the dialogue intelligibility go? You don't have that anymore, because usually like 2 to 3K, maybe 1 to 4K is in that region is going to have a big null where the sound says, all right, well, we're both trying to do the same thing, but the crossover kind of sucks here because it's not a really, well, I'll skip that. We'll just say the crossover kind of sucks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to associate it with price, but that's not always true. So I'll skip that for now. But you have basically two sound waves fighting each other, and they just cancel out. So if you're listening when you're standing up, it's going to sound different. Now, how noticeable that difference is, when you're standing up, you may not notice right away that it sounds different. But if you were to sit down and then stand up, you're probably going to notice the difference. Is it going to bother you? I don't know. But I like the idea of a speaker that has a more uniform vertical control dispersion. And that's why I do tend to prefer coaxial designs, or at least a good three-way design with a dedicated mid-range and a tweeter that are crossed over before the mid-range starts beaming, and the tweeter doesn't have a lot of distortion or breakup from being crossed so low that there's not a hole in the response from the mid-range to the tweeter.
Yeah, that's an interesting recommendation. If you have a not dedicated theater and you plan on walking around and listening to your system, you may want a concentric design, because when you stand up, you're going to get better vertical off-axis response with a concentric, more consistent compared to a different system. Yeah. Kind of interesting.
I like concentric.
Yeah.
Trade-offs.
What's another one we have?
Now, if you can't catch the show, we do have an audio version at anchor.fm/daily HiFi. So make sure to go on over there if you like to listen to the show.